I cheated at a bachelorette party a year ago. Now my husband's acting like he's out of my league. That's literally my life right now. I'm Brooke, 32, and I royally messed up my marriage last year. Now I'm watching my husband transform into this guy who acts like he could do so much better than me. It all started with my friend Melissa's bachelorette party in Miami. Girls trip, beach vibes, way too many drinks. You know how it goes. My husband Nate wasn't thrilled about me going, but I told him he was being ridiculous. It's just a girls' weekend, I said. Like, hello, I'm a girl. I'm a grown woman. I don't need permission. The first night was fine, just dinner and drinks at the hotel. But the second night, that's when everything went sideways. We hit this club downtown and I was feeling myself. New dress, hair done, looking hot. I had a few cocktails, then a few shots, and then honestly, things get a little blurry. I remember dancing with this guy who had dark hair and this jawline that reminded me of Nate. In my drunk brain, I actually convinced myself he looked exactly like my husband. Ridiculous, right? But in that moment, with the lights flashing and the music pounding, my alcohol-soaked brain was like, this could totally be Nate. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in some hotel room that wasn't mine with this stranger next to me. When I actually got a good look at him in the daylight, he looked nothing like Nate except maybe the hair color. I freaked out, grabbed my stuff, and bolted. I was completely devastated. I made it back to our hotel, and Tiffany, one of the girls on the trip, spotted me doing the walk of shame. I swore her to secrecy, telling her through tears that I'd made a horrible mistake. She promised not to say anything, and I thought that was that. Back home, I tried to act normal. I smiled more, initiated sex with Nate, and basically tried to overcompensate for my guilt. For a few weeks, I actually thought I'd gotten away with it. I kept telling myself it was a one-time mistake that didn't have to ruin my marriage. Then came that awful day. Nate called me at work and asked me to meet him for lunch. Not like a cute surprise lunch date. His voice was weird, controlled. When I got to the restaurant, one look at his face told me everything. His expression was perfectly blank, but his ears were bright red. His tell when he's furious. I know what happened in Miami, he said, staring at me with these cold eyes I'd never seen before. Tiffany's husband is friends with my colleague. Word got back to me. I completely lost it right there in the restaurant. Sobbing, mascara probably everywhere, blabbering about how drunk I was, how the guy looked just like him, how it was a stupid, horrible mistake. I was throwing everything at the wall, hoping something would stick. The whole "he looked like you" excuse sounded pathetic, even to my own ears. But I was desperate. Nate just watched me melt down with this detached look. When I finally ran out of excuses, he simply stood up, put money on the table, and said, "I need some time. Don't call me." He didn't come home for a whole week. I was calling, texting, leaving tearful voicemails. I was terrified he was off finding the guy from the club, or worse, talking to divorce lawyers. I barely ate or slept that week. When he finally came back, he looked different somehow. Calmer, but colder. He sat me down and said, "Here's how this is going to work if you want to save this marriage. No more drinking, period. No more girls' trips, complete transparency with your phone and social media. One slip up and I'm gone." I agreed immediately. I would have agreed to anything. I was just so relieved he was giving me another chance. I haven't touched alcohol since that day. Became the perfect wife, cooking, cleaning, whatever he wanted. I thought eventually things would go back to normal. That was a year ago. Things never went back to normal. I started noticing the changes about a month after our reconciliation, if you can call it that. Nate was already attractive, tall, naturally fit with this confidence that made heads turn. But suddenly, he kicked everything into overdrive. He doubled his gym time, going from 3 days a week to 6, started meal prepping these fancy high-protein lunches, downloaded meditation apps, bought a whole new wardrobe that fit his increasingly muscular frame perfectly. At 39, he started looking better than guys in their 20s. At first, I thought it was hot. My husband getting even sexier? Yes, please. I figured maybe this was his way of rebuilding his confidence after what I did. I even tried joining him at the gym a few times. But he made it clear this was his thing. That's when I realized something was different. Before, Nate would have been thrilled to have me join him for workouts. Now he seemed annoyed by my presence, like I was intruding on his space. When I tried to be flirty about his new muscles, he'd just say thanks with barely a smile and continue whatever he was doing. It wasn't just the physical changes. His entire focus shifted. He started staying later at the office, saying he was working toward a promotion. Weekend brunches with me were replaced with networking events. Our date nights dwindled to maybe once a month, and even then he seemed distracted. Just working toward our future. He'd say when I complained about his absence, but it felt more like he was working toward his future, and I was no longer a priority in the equation. Then came the social events for work. Suddenly, there were all these happy hours and client dinners that I wasn't invited to. "It's just work stuff. You'd be bored," he'd say, coming home late, smelling like expensive cologne, and sometimes with a hint of perfume that wasn't mine. When I would question him about these late nights, he'd roll his eyes. "I'm networking, Brooke. That's how you get ahead." Like I was some idiot who couldn't understand basic career advancement. One night, I found a long blonde hair on his jacket. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. Probably from Stephanie in accounting. We were stuck in the same elevator. His explanation was so casual, so dismissive, it made me feel crazy for even asking. The most infuriating part, our sex life completely changed. Before, Nate was always the one initiating, always telling me how beautiful I was. Now he rarely made the first move. When we did have sex, it felt mechanical, like he was just going through the motions. Is something wrong? I asked him once after a particularly disconnected encounter. Nothing's wrong, he said, already rolling away from me. Just tired from the gym. I tried everything to get his attention back. New lingerie, surprise lunch visits to his office, texting him during the day. His responses grew increasingly lukewarm. It was like watching someone slowly check out of our relationship while still physically being there. Something was changing in my husband, and it terrified me. He wasn't leaving, not technically, but emotionally, he was already halfway out the door. And the worst part was I couldn't really blame him. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to these changes than just recovering from my betrayal. Everything came to a head 3 months ago at this fancy work party Nate actually invited me to. I spent hours getting ready. New dress, salon visit, the works. I thought maybe this was his way of bringing me back into his life. I should have known better. The moment we walked into that rooftop event, I realized why he brought me. He wanted me to see exactly what I was up against. The room was filled with gorgeous women, the kind with legs for days and perfect everything, and they all knew my husband. Nate, oh my God, you look amazing. This tall redhead practically launched herself at him, air kissing both cheeks. That new workout routine is definitely working. She gave him this up and down look that made me want to pull her extensions out. Thanks, Vanessa. The trainer you recommended is brutal but worth it, Nate replied, giving her the smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. Throughout the night, it was the same story with different women. They would spot Nate, light up like Christmas trees, and come over with their perfect bodies and designer outfits. I stood there with my Target dress, which had looked amazing in my mirror at home, but now felt cheap, feeling like complete garbage. Who are all these women? I whispered to Nate between his adoring fan encounters. Just colleagues, he said casually. That's Vanessa. She's a model our firm represents. Same with Alexis over there and Madison. I glanced over at Madison, tall blonde, probably 25, wearing a dress that cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. You represent a lot of models, huh? I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Nate shrugged. The entertainment division is growing. It's good for business. As the night wore on, I watched these women flirt shamelessly with my husband, touching his arm while laughing at his jokes, whispering things in his ear that made him smirk. One even had the nerve to straighten his tie, her hands lingering on his chest. The worst part, Nate wasn't exactly flirting back, but he wasn't shutting it down either. A wink here, a knowing smile there. He was eating up the attention while I stood by like some pathetic accessory. When one particularly gorgeous brunette handed Nate her business card for coffee sometime, I'd had enough. I grabbed his arm as soon as she walked away. What is happening right now? Are you seriously going to get coffee with her? Nate slipped the card into his pocket with a casual shrug. It's networking, Brooke. That's how business works. That wasn't business. She was practically undressing you with her eyes. He gave me this look, part amusement, part pity, that made me feel 2 inches tall. Don't worry about it. It's not a bachelorette party in Miami. The comment hit me like a slap. He had never thrown my mistake in my face so blatantly before. I stood there speechless as he walked off to chat with some senior partner, leaving me alone at the bar. On the Uber ride home, I tried to talk to him about it. Those women were all over you, and you did nothing to stop it. They were being friendly. You're overreacting. Friendly? That blonde literally asked if you'd been working out while staring at your crotch. Nate just looked out the window. Maybe you're projecting. Not everyone crosses lines when they're being social. Another dig at my infidelity. I shut up after that. That night, watching him move around our bathroom with this new confidence, his body more defined than I'd ever seen it, a terrifying thought hit me. My husband was turning into someone who was out of my league, and he knew it. After that party, my paranoia went into overdrive. I started checking his phone whenever he left it unattended, scrolling through his texts, his emails, his call history, looking for evidence of something, anything. Most days, I'd find nothing suspicious. Just work emails, texts with his gym buddy about protein shakes, normal stuff. But the lack of evidence almost made it worse. If he was cheating, he was being incredibly careful about it. I began tracking his location through his phone, watching the little dot move from our house to his office, sometimes to the gym, occasionally to restaurants or bars I didn't recognize. During these unknown stops, I'd text him casually, "How's your day going?" just to see how long it would take him to respond and what excuse he'd give. In a meeting, or grabbing coffee with the team, were his usual responses. Nothing I could prove was a lie, but nothing that reassured me either. The Nate I married would have shown me pictures of his colleagues or invited me to join them for drinks after work. This new Nate kept his worlds completely separate. I was no longer welcome in his professional life, and he seemed perfectly content with that arrangement. I started dropping by his office unexpectedly, bringing lunch just because I was in the area. The receptionist always had this pitying look when she saw me, like she knew something I didn't. Nate would emerge from his office looking annoyed, accepting my lunch with a tight smile before ushering me back to the elevator. "You can't just show up here, Brooke. I have meetings, clients. It's unprofessional." Before my mistake, he'd always been thrilled to see me at his office. Now, I was an inconvenience. One afternoon, I drove by the gym during his usual workout time, just to verify that's where he actually was. I spotted his car in the parking lot and felt a momentary relief until I went inside and couldn't find him anywhere. When I asked at the front desk, they said he'd checked in but might be in one of the private training rooms. Private training rooms. Since when did Nate need private training? I waited in the parking lot for 40 minutes until he emerged with a fit woman in workout clothes. They were laughing about something as they walked to their cars. No touching, nothing obviously inappropriate, but the familiar way they talked made my stomach turn. When Nate got home that evening, I casually asked about his workout. "Did you go alone today?" "Yeah, just the usual routine," he said, not looking up from his phone. The lie hung in the air between us. I wanted to confront him, to scream about the woman I'd seen. But what proof did I have? They were just talking. If I accused him of something more, he'd know I was spying on him. So I swallowed my suspicion and said nothing. It wasn't just his potential cheating that was eating at me. It was the way other women looked at him now, at the grocery store, at restaurants, even at church. Female eyes following him, taking in his tall frame, his now chiseled jawline. The confident way he carried himself, and the way he looked at me, had changed too. There was a clinical quality to his gaze now, like he was constantly evaluating whether I was still worth his time. The man who once couldn't keep his hands off me now seemed to touch me only out of obligation. When he did compliment me, it felt hollow. "You look nice" had replaced "you're beautiful," or "I'm the luckiest man alive." His words were technically positive, but lacked any real warmth or desire. One night, after he declined my advances for the third time that week, I broke down. "Are you punishing me? Is that what this is about?" He looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" "This. You're distant. You're cold. You barely touch me anymore. If you haven't forgiven me, just say so." Nate sighed, running a hand through his hair, a new nervous habit he developed. "I'm not punishing you, Brooke. I'm just focused on myself right now, on my career, on my health. Is that so wrong? It is when it feels like you're preparing for a life without me." He didn't deny it. He just looked at me with those unreadable eyes and said, "I'm preparing for a better life. Whether you're in it or not is up to you." I'd never felt more terrified in my entire marriage. A few weeks after my parking lot stakeout, I decided enough was enough. If Nate was cheating on me, I deserved to know. If he wasn't, then he needed to stop acting like he was about to trade me in for a newer model. I waited until he was home on a Saturday. He was reading something on his tablet, glasses perched on his nose, another new addition that somehow made him even more attractive. Damn it. I sat down across from him, heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said, using the same serious tone he'd used when confronting me about Miami. He looked up, expression neutral. "About whatever's going on with you. The late nights, the private training sessions you lie about, the women from your office who call you after hours." I'd heard him once taking a call in our backyard around 10 p.m., laughing softly into the phone. "Are you having an affair? Because if you are, I deserve to know." Nate removed his glasses slowly, setting them and the tablet aside. For a moment, I thought I saw a flash of the old Nate, the one who was open with me, who shared everything. "I'm not having an affair, Brooke." "Then why are you acting so different? Why do you barely look at me anymore? Why do you lie about who you're with?" He sighed, then got up and retrieved his phone. He pulled up his calendar and showed me his schedule for the past month. Training sessions with Alex, the woman I'd seen him with, were clearly marked. So were late meetings, client dinners, everything. Alex is Alexis. She's a certified trainer who specializes in executive fitness programs. My firm subsidizes it. Those late calls, client calls from the West Coast. The networking events, exactly what I said they were. I stared at the evidence, confusion washing over me. "But you lied. You said you worked out alone, because you've been acting like a private investigator for months, checking my phone, following me to the gym, showing up at my office unannounced. It's exhausting, Brooke. So sometimes, yes, I give simple answers to avoid the interrogation." He looked tired, rubbing his hand over his face. "Do you realize how draining it is? I'm trying to advance my career, improve myself, move forward from what happened, and meanwhile, you're treating me like I'm the one who cheated." His words hit me like a bucket of cold water. He wasn't wrong. Then why pull away from me? My voice was smaller now. Why all the changes? Nate was quiet for a long moment. When I found out what happened in Miami, something broke in me. Not just trust, something deeper. The way I saw myself, the way I saw us, I realized I'd been complacent, taking our relationship for granted. He gestured to himself. "All of this, the fitness, the career focus, the networking, it's not about replacing you. It's about rebuilding myself, finding my worth outside of just being Brooke's husband." "But you're acting like you don't even want me anymore," I said, tears welling up. "I'm trying to want you in a healthy way," he replied, his voice gentle but firm. "Before, my whole world revolved around you. That's not sustainable, especially after what happened. I need to value myself enough that if something like Miami ever happened again, I'd have the strength to walk away." His honesty stung worse than any accusation. He wasn't cheating. He was preparing himself emotionally to leave me if necessary. "So what happens now?" I asked, afraid of the answer. "That depends," he said. "Can you accept that I'm not the same person I was before? That our relationship can't go back to how it was?" What does that even mean? It means I need space to grow. It means I'm not going to prioritize your feelings over my well-being anymore. It means you need to deal with your insecurity without making it my problem. I felt like he'd slapped me. So I just have to accept you flirting with models and coming home late and treating me like an afterthought? I don't flirt with them. I network. There's a difference. He shook his head. And this right here is exactly the problem. You can't see past your jealousy to understand what I'm trying to build for us. For us or for you, I challenged. At this point, I'm not sure there's a difference, he said quietly. We stared at each other across what felt like an immeasurable distance. He wasn't the man I married anymore, and he didn't seem particularly interested in going back to being that man. I love you, Brooke. I do, but I don't need you the way I used to, and that's probably healthier for both of us. I'd wanted clarity, and I got it, but it wasn't the answer I was hoping for. Everything fell apart last week. A full year after Miami, and the final nail in the coffin of our marriage appeared out of nowhere. Nate came home with a bottle of champagne. For a fleeting moment, I thought maybe this was a gesture of reconciliation. He popped it open, poured 2 glasses, and handed one to me with a smile I hadn't seen in months. I made partner, he said simply. I forced a smile. That's amazing. Congratulations. I tried to sound genuinely happy for him, but inside I was thinking about all those late nights, all those networking events that had taken him away from me. This promotion had cost us our marriage, whether he realized it or not. We clinked glasses, and I waited for him to say something about us, about how things would be different now that he'd achieved this goal. Instead, he said something that shattered what was left of my world. I've been in therapy for the past 10 months. I nearly choked on my champagne. Therapy? Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed to figure some things out on my own. He took a long sip of his drink. I've been working through what happened in Miami, my feelings about our marriage, what I want for my future. And what conclusions have you come to? I asked, already dreading the answer. I want a divorce, Brooke. The words hung in the air between us. No anger in his voice, no accusation, just calm certainty. But I thought you were trying to forgive me, I stammered. I have forgiven you, he said, his voice gentle. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognition. We're not good for each other anymore. Is there someone else? I had to ask, even though part of me didn't want to know. No, he said, looking me directly in the eyes. This is about me finally putting myself first. He explained that he'd already found an apartment, that he'd be moving out the following weekend. Everything was arranged, lawyers, finances, even who would get which furniture. He'd been planning this for months while I was busy checking his phone and following him to the gym. What about everything we've built together? I pleaded. 3 years of marriage just gone? Nate gave me a sad smile. What exactly have we built, Brooke? A relationship where you cheated within the first year? Where I've spent the last 12 months trying to rebuild my self-worth? Where you've been more focused on catching me doing something wrong than on fixing what you broke? I had no answer for that. The next few days were a blur. Nate packed methodically, taking only what he needed. No arguments over possessions, no dramatic scenes, just the quiet dismantling of our life together. On his last day in our house, I made one final desperate attempt. Please don't do this. We can go to therapy together. I can change. He paused, suitcase in hand. You know what? My therapist helped me realize that I deserve someone who wouldn't have cheated in the first place. Someone who values faithfulness the same way I do. It was one mistake, I cried. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or burning dinner. You made a series of choices, Brooke. You chose to drink too much. You chose to dance with that guy. You chose to go to his hotel, and afterward, you chose to lie about it until you were caught. He wasn't angry as he said this. That would have been easier to handle. He was just clear, like he was finally seeing our relationship for what it really was. I wish you the best. I really do, he said, and I could tell he meant it. But we're done. I watched through our front window as he loaded the last of his things into his car. He looked lighter somehow, unburdened. The man who drove away wasn't the same one I'd married 3 years ago. He was stronger, more confident, completely self-possessed. That night, scrolling mindlessly through social media to distract myself from the silence of my empty house, I saw a post from Vanessa, the redhead from the party, a group photo at some rooftop bar downtown. And there was Nate in the background, smiling with a glass in his hand, surrounded by his colleagues celebrating his promotion. He looked happy, genuinely effortlessly happy without me. 2 days later, my friend sent me a listing for a condo that had just gone on the market. Isn't this the building Nate wanted to buy in last year? The one you said was too expensive? Sure enough, there was Nate's name on the purchase record. He'd bought a place in the luxury building he'd shown me months ago, the one I dismissed as unnecessarily fancy. He'd been planning this move, this new life, right under my nose. The irony isn't lost on me. A year ago, I thought I could have a wild night in Miami with no consequences. I thought my husband would always be there, always adoring me, always putting me first. Now he's gone, living his best life in a fancy condo, making partner, looking better than ever. And I'm still here, in the house we bought together, alone with the consequences of my actions. Sometimes I wonder if he orchestrated this whole thing, the glow up, the career advancement, all of it, just to show me exactly what I threw away that night in Miami. But I know that gives me too much credit in his story. The truth is, I'm not the main character in his life anymore. He's moved on to a new chapter, one where he's the hero of his own story, not just a supporting character in mine. And me? I'm still stuck in the aftermath of my mistake, finally understanding what it means to watch someone become completely out of your league. This story is over, but the next one will leave you speechless. Subscribe now.